Hey there, what is up you guys? I am Jerry and welcome back to the channel, The Chicago Griller. This is the show where I share my favorite tips, tricks, and recipes for the Weber Q. If you think that I can help you out, hit that like button and subscribe. For a long time, I only grilled things like burgers and steaks on my Weber Q because I thought you could only cook things directly on the grates with this particular grill. That was before I realized that with a roasting rack like this, as well as some kind of heat deflector, you could actually set up your Q to cook indirectly. This opens up a world of new recipes that are possible on this grill, so it's definitely a setup that you'll want to learn how to use. So in today's video, not only will I show you how to use that rack and shield to set your Q up for indirect grilling, I'm going to point out two mistakes that you'll want to avoid when cooking with this setup. So let's get to it after the intro. Now, if you're lucky, you'll be able to buy this roasting rack and trivet set, aka the roasting pack, directly from Weber or at your favorite outdoor supply store. Unfortunately, this set seems to be discontinued everywhere except for Australia. So if you're like me here in the USA, you're gonna have to MacGyver one up in order to cook indirect. Fortunately, there's nothing really unique or special about the Weber Q roasting pack. It's basically a standard toaster oven tray lined with some aluminum. So here's exactly what you do. Buy a generic toaster oven rack like I did on Amazon. The exact one I used is shown right here as well as linked down below. And then tear off an equal size piece of aluminum foil. Now what the aluminum foil does, or the Weber branded heat shield if you're lucky enough to be able to buy one, is as follows. It blocks the direct heat coming up from the burner tube below your food. So now the heat coming from below has to flow around that shield and rack, kind of simulating the effects of an oven. And that's indirect grilling. Now that said, you will notice that the Weber branded one has a few holes punched into the surface. It's not just for aesthetics, it does serve a purpose. First, it allows some ventilation through. And second, it allows for some of that rendered fat and grease during your cook to escape. So you will have to do the same with your homemade setup. But that's easy. To do this, grab a knife and simply poke a few holes through. And voila, you've got your own DIY shield. Yeah. The Weber one sure does look a lot nicer, but there's nothing inherently special about it. It isn't a sturdy tray like the stock pictures may make it seem. It's really just floppy aluminum. All it has compared to our sheet of torn aluminum foil is, again, it's perfectly machined to the right size and does have some Q branding and perfectly spaced out holes. Regardless if you're able to use the fancy looking branded setup or a DIY version, you lay your food on the rack, place everything on your preheated grill, and let the magic of roasting happen. Easy, right? Well, it should be, but like I said in the intro, there are two mistakes that you're going to want to be aware of and that you'll want to avoid when cooking with this setup. First, and what probably should be most obvious, is you want to make sure you are cooking on the correct side of your rack, because it matters. You see, after laying down that heat shield, you need to make sure that the rack is elevated off of the aluminum. You don't want it to be laying flat on the aluminum because otherwise you're more or less directly on the grates. So make sure you're placing your rack feet side down. These are feet, right? Well, I'm going to call them feet because they sure look like it. Because with the feet down, the rack is now elevated off the grill grates. That said, if you're not paying attention and you do put it down the wrong way, like I did here with this pork tenderloin cook, you are really going to screw up your cook time. And that's because you've basically now essentially negated your entire setup. Yeah, sure, that aluminum layer will protect from a little bit of that heat coming from below, but there's still going to be a large amount of heat transfer coming through since you're essentially laying right on top of the grates. And as you'll see, I ended up overshooting the target 145 degrees F that you look for in this cook. Oops. So going forward, I'll definitely be paying a lot more attention to how I'm laying this rack down. Again, all this may sound super obvious, but quite frankly, if you're tired or if you're in a hurry, even someone like myself who cooks on a queue all the time can make this really stupid mistake. The second mistake that you want to avoid when cooking with this roasting rack and shield setup is that you do not want to cook by time. Instead, cook to a target temperature and confirm that temperature with a meat thermometer. So yes, it is true, in a lot of videos I do share my total cook times. And it is important, but you should use that as just a starting guideline. Because at the end of the day, there are going to be a lot of variables that affect the heat and temperature of your grill. But this is especially so when grilling indirect. For example, outdoor temperatures and wind can have a large effect on how your grill performs. Some days I can have my gas knob set to high and it will reach 450 or even 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Other days, like one particularly cold and windy fall afternoon, my Weber Q2000 could only get up to about 350 degrees Fahrenheit on high heat. The result was that it took an hour to cook some chicken drumsticks, when it usually might take only 40 minutes. Now, had I pulled that chicken off the grill at 40 minutes and had it for dinner, I would have had a good chance of spending the rest of the night on that porcelain throne. Now, there are many other factors that affect how your grill cooks when using an indirect setup. For example, how recently has your grill been cleaned? A cleaner grill typically runs at hotter temps. Additionally, the number of holes or how large your holes are in your heat shield will also affect your cooking time and temps. If you have larger holes or more direct heat is going to pass through and your grill will run hotter. Makes sense. And if you have smaller holes or just simply forget to punch out some holes, your grill is going to run cooler. Or at least the ambient temperature readings will read cooler. Either way, this will have an effect on your cooking time. The point is, you're going to need to constantly monitor your grill and the temperatures that it's reading and holding when cooking indirect. And so, that is how you can set up your Weber Q for indirect grilling and roasting, as well as 2 mistakes that you're going to want to avoid when using this setup. I hope that this video will help you avoid these 2 mistakes, allowing you to grill and roast delicious meals on your Weber Q every single time. I hope that you found this video very helpful, and if you did, I would really appreciate it if you hit that like button and subscribed. So, do you ever cook indirect on your Weber Q? Have you ever made any of the mistakes that I mentioned in this video? I'd be very curious to know. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. Thank you all very much again for watching. I'll be back again soon with a new video. Until then, stay safe and see ya. Bye.